My name is Sarah, and I want to tell you about the most transformative journey of my life. It wasn't climbing mountains or traveling to exotic places. It was something much simpler, yet incredibly powerful, reading in English every single day.
3 years ago, I was stuck. I had been studying English for over 5 years, taking classes, watching movies with subtitles, and practicing conversations with language exchange partners.
My English was okay. I could understand most things and communicate basic ideas, but I felt like I had hit a wall. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't seem to break through to that next level where English would truly feel natural. I remember the exact moment everything changed. It was a rainy Tuesday evening in September. I was sitting in my favorite coffee shop, feeling frustrated after another awkward conversation with the native speaker earlier that day. I had stumbled over words, mixed up tenses, and worst of all, I couldn't express the complex thoughts that flowed so easily in my native language. That's when I noticed an elderly man at the corner table. He was completely absorbed in a thick English novel, his eyes dancing across the pages with such joy and understanding. I watched him for a while, fascinated by how effortlessly he seemed to be consuming the words. When he finished his coffee and stood to leave, I mustered up the courage to approach him. "Excuse me," I said in my hesitant English. "I couldn't help but notice you were really enjoying that book. I'm trying to improve my English, and I was wondering, do you have any advice?" The man smiled warmly. His name was Robert, and he told me something that would change my life forever. "Young lady," he said, "I used to struggle with English too when I moved here from Germany 40 years ago. The thing that transformed my English wasn't grammar books or language apps. It was reading. Every single day, without fail." He explained that reading in English had done something magical for his brain. It had taught him how the language really worked, not just the rules, but the rhythm, the flow, the subtle ways that native speakers actually express themselves. "But," he warned, "you have to be patient with yourself. The changes don't happen overnight. They happen slowly, quietly, like a river carving through stone." That night, I made a promise to myself. I would read in English every day for 1 year. No excuses, no breaks. No matter how busy or tired I was, I would read at least 30 minutes every single day, and I would document the changes I noticed.
I had no idea that this simple decision would completely transform not just my English, but my entire relationship with learning, with myself, and with the world around me. The 10 changes I experienced were so profound that I still marvel at them today. The first thing I had to do was choose what to read. Robert had recommended starting with books that were slightly below my current level, stories that I could enjoy without constantly reaching for a dictionary. I decided to begin with young adult novels, short stories, and graded readers specifically designed for English learners. My first book was The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. I remember holding it in my hands that first evening, feeling both excited and terrified. What if I couldn't understand it? What if I gave up after a few days like I had with so many other English learning attempts? But I opened to the first page and began, "When I stepped out into the bright sunlight from the darkness of the movie house, I had only 2 things on my mind, Paul Newman and a ride home." The words flowed more easily than I expected. "Oh, thou." Yes, there were words I didn't know, but I could understand the story, feel the narrator's voice, and most importantly, I wanted to know what happened next.
The first change I noticed happened within just 2 weeks of starting my daily reading habit. It was subtle at first, so subtle that I almost missed it. I was having a conversation with my English teacher when she suddenly stopped mid-sentence and looked at me with surprise. "Sarah," she said, "did you just use the phrase blown away correctly and in perfect context?" I paused. Thinking back to what I had just said, I had been describing how I felt about a movie, and yes, I had said I was blown away by the cinematography. But here's the strange thing. I had no memory of explicitly learning that phrase. It had just come out naturally. That's when I realized the first magical thing that reading was doing to my brain. I was absorbing natural expressions and idioms without even trying. These weren't the formal phrases I learned in textbooks or the stilted expressions from language learning apps. These were the real, living words that native speakers actually used in their daily lives. As I continued reading The Outsiders, I found myself unconsciously picking up phrases like "stay gold," "tough break," and "that's the way it goes." When I moved on to other books, more expressions seeped into my vocabulary: piece of cake, hit the nail on the head, break a leg. But the beautiful thing was that I wasn't memorizing these phrases. I was feeling them, understanding their emotional weight and knowing instinctively when to use them. I started keeping a small notebook where I would jot down these natural expressions when I noticed them appearing in my speech. Within a month, I had filled 15 pages. My English teacher was amazed at how much more natural and fluent I sounded. But more importantly, I felt more confident. I was finally speaking English the way real people spoke it, not like a textbook robot. The second change began to manifest around the 3-week mark, and it was perhaps even more surprising than the first. I was reading Wonder by R.J. Palacio when I suddenly realized something extraordinary I was no longer translating in my head. For years, whenever someone spoke to me in English or whenever I read something, my brain would automatically translate everything into my native language first, then formulate a response in my native language, and finally translate that response back into English. It was like having a very slow, unreliable interpreter living in my head. But as I sat there reading about Augie's first day at school, I realized that I was understanding the story directly in English. The words weren't becoming other words in my mind, they were becoming images, emotions, and ideas. When Augie felt nervous, I felt nervous. When he was happy, I was happy. And all of this was happening in English, not in translation. This breakthrough was incredible because it meant I could finally think in English. Real thinking. Not just translating thoughts. I could form opinions, make jokes, and express complex emotions without that exhausting mental gymnastics routine I had been doing for years. I tested this new ability during conversations and was amazed to find that my response time had dramatically improved. I was no longer pausing awkwardly while my brain played translator. The English was just there, ready and waiting like a trusted friend. The third change was probably the most emotional one for me, and it happened during my second month of daily reading. I was reading The Fault in Our Stars by John Green when I reached the part where Augustus tells Hazel about his cancer returning, and suddenly, unexpectedly, I started crying. But here's what made it so special: I was crying in English. I was feeling these deep, complex emotions directly through English words, not through translation. The language had stopped being foreign and had become a part of my emotional vocabulary. English wasn't just a tool for communication anymore. It was a language of feeling, This emotional connection to English transformed everything. When I was happy, English words for joy came naturally. When I was frustrated, I could express that frustration with nuance and precision. When I wanted to be funny, English humor flowed more easily. Reading had given me something I never expected: an emotional relationship with the language. English wasn't just words on a page or sounds in the air. It was becoming a part of who I was. By the end of my second month, the fourth change became impossible to ignore. My vocabulary was expanding at an incredible rate, but not in the way I expected. I wasn't memorizing word lists or studying with flashcards. Instead, I was learning words through context, through stories, through the natural flow of narrative. When I encountered the word melancholy in The Perks of Being a Wallflower, I didn't need to look it up in a dictionary. The context, the mood of the scene, the character's feelings, everything painted a perfect picture of what melancholy meant. It wasn't just a definition, it was an experience. I could feel the weight of melancholy, understand its subtle difference from simple sadness, and know exactly when to use it. This contextual learning was so much more powerful than traditional vocabulary study. Instead of dry definitions, I had rich, emotional associations with words. Serendipity wasn't just a pleasant surprise. It was the feeling Charlie had when he found the perfect gift for his secret Santa. Resilience wasn't just the ability to recover. It was watching Hazel Grace navigate her illness with such strength and grace. I started noticing that I could guess the meaning of new words with remarkable accuracy. My brain had learned to pick up context clues, to understand how words worked together, to feel the rhythm and patterns of English. Reading was teaching me not just individual words, but how the entire language system worked. By month 3, I had encountered and absorbed over 500 new words and phrases, and I could use them naturally in conversation. My English teacher said it was like watching someone transform from a tourist speaking phrasebook English into someone who truly lived in the language. The fifth change was perhaps the most practical one, and it showed up in an unexpected place: my writing. I had always struggled with English writing. My sentences were grammatically correct but stilted and unnatural. I wrote like someone who had learned English from a textbook because, well, I had. But after 3 months of daily reading, something magical happened when I sat down to write an essay for my English class. The words flowed differently. My sentences had rhythm. I found myself using varied sentence structures without even thinking about it. Complex ideas seemed to organize themselves naturally on the page. I realized that reading had been giving me thousands of examples of how English actually worked in practice. I had absorbed the natural patterns of the language, how native speakers constructed sentences, how they transitioned between ideas, how they created emphasis and flow. My teacher was amazed when she graded that essay. She said it was the first time my writing had sounded truly natural and confident, but more importantly, writing had become enjoyable for me. I was no longer fighting against the language. I was dancing with it. The sixth change affected something I hadn't even considered: my pronunciation and speaking rhythm. Even though reading is a silent activity, it was somehow improving how I spoke out loud. As I read, I began to hear the words in my mind with what felt like native pronunciation, the rhythm of English sentences, the stress patterns, the natural melody of the language. All of this was becoming internalized through reading. When characters spoke in dialogue, I could hear their voices, their intonation, their emotional inflection. This internal hearing began to influence how I spoke.
My English teacher and conversation partners started commenting that my pronunciation sounded more natural, more native-like. I was stressing the right syllables, using natural intonation patterns, and speaking with a rhythm that sounded authentically English. I think this happened because reading gave me so many examples of how English sounds when it's working properly. Even though I was reading silently, my brain was processing the natural music of the language and gradually adopting it as my own. The seventh change was something I discovered during a conversation with a native speaker friend. We were discussing a movie we had both seen, and she suddenly stopped and looked at me with surprise. "Sarah," she said, "you just made a really subtle joke about the director's style, and you used sarcasm perfectly. How did you learn to do that?" I thought about her question and realized something amazing reading had taught me the subtle nuances of English that no textbook or language app could ever capture. Through countless hours of reading dialogue, narrative voice, and character interactions, I had absorbed the sophisticated ways that English speakers express irony, sarcasm, humor, and subtle meaning. I had learned when a character was being sincere versus when they were being ironic. I could feel the difference between gentle teasing and cutting sarcasm. I understood how writers used understatement for effect, how they built suspense, how they revealed character through dialogue style. These weren't things I studied, they were things I absorbed through experience. Every book was like a masterclass in the subtle art of English communication. Authors showed me how the language could be playful, serious, romantic, mysterious, or heartbreaking, often all within the same page. This understanding of nuance made my conversations so much richer. I could participate in the kind of sophisticated, layered communication that native speakers took for granted. I wasn't just exchanging information anymore. I was truly connecting with people through the full range of what English could express. The eighth change affected my confidence in a way that surprised me. For years, I had felt like an outsider in English-speaking environments. I could participate, but always with the awareness that I was a non-native speaker, always with a slight hesitation, always with the fear that I might say something wrong or sound awkward. But as my reading habit strengthened my English foundation, something shifted inside me. I began to feel like English belonged to me too. It wasn't a foreign language I was borrowing, it was becoming my language, a tool I could wield with increasing skill and comfort. This confidence showed up in unexpected ways. I started volunteering to give presentations at work in English. I joined English-speaking social groups. I even started writing creative pieces, short stories and poems, in English, something I never would have attempted before. The transformation was internal but visible. People commented that I seemed more relaxed, more natural, more myself when speaking English. And they were right. Reading had given me such a solid foundation in the language that I no longer felt like I was performing or pretending. I was just being me, in English. The ninth change was perhaps the most intellectual one. Reading in English opened up an entirely new world of ideas and perspectives that I had never accessed before. So much of the world's knowledge, literature, and cultural conversation happens in English, and suddenly I had direct access to all of it. I could read original research papers, follow international news without waiting for translations, engage with online communities discussing topics I was passionate about, and access educational resources that weren't available in my native language. The intellectual doors that opened were endless. But it wasn't just about access to information. Reading in English gave me access to different ways of thinking. Different languages organize thoughts differently.
And by becoming truly fluent in English, I was adding new thinking patterns to my mental toolkit. I found myself able to approach problems from new angles, to think about concepts in ways that weren't available to me before. It was like adding new colors to my mental palette. The world became richer and more nuanced. The 10th and final change was the most unexpected and perhaps the most beautiful. Reading in English every day taught me something profound about learning itself. It showed me that the most powerful learning happens not through force or pressure, but through joy, curiosity, and consistent, gentle practice. For years, I had approached language learning like a battle to be won. I would attack grammar rules, memorize vocabulary lists, and push myself through exercises with grim determination. It was exhausting and often discouraging. I felt like I was constantly fighting against the language instead of flowing with it. But reading taught me a completely different approach to learning. When I read stories I enjoyed, learning happened naturally, almost invisibly. I wasn't studying. I was living experiences through characters, exploring new worlds, feeling emotions, and thinking thoughts, all in English. This gentle, joyful approach to learning began to influence other areas of my life. I started learning the piano by playing songs I loved instead of grinding through scales. I began studying history by reading engaging narratives instead of memorizing dates and facts. I approached cooking by experimenting with recipes that excited me instead of following rigid rules. Reading had taught me that sustainable learning happens when you're having fun, when you're engaged, when you're following your curiosity rather than forcing yourself through predetermined programs. It was a revelation that changed how I approached every new skill or subject. But the story doesn't end there. The most beautiful part of this journey was realizing that these 10 changes were just the beginning. Each month of reading brought new discoveries, new breakthroughs, new depths of understanding and connection with the English language. I started reading more challenging books, classic literature, contemporary fiction, non-fiction works that explored complex ideas. Each genre taught me something new about how English could be used. Poetry showed me the musical qualities of the language. Science writing taught me precision and clarity. Historical novels revealed how the language had evolved over time. My reading speed increased dramatically. What used to take me an hour to read now took 30 minutes, and I understood it better than before. My comprehension became so natural that I could read for pure pleasure, getting lost in stories without any awareness that I was reading in a second language. Duh. I began to dream in English, not just occasionally, but regularly. My subconscious mind had fully accepted English as one of its native languages. When I woke up, I sometimes couldn't remember which language my dreams had been in. They had just been thoughts and experiences, as natural as breathing. The relationships I formed through English became deeper and more meaningful. I could express subtle emotions, share complex ideas, and connect with people on a level that had previously been impossible. English was no longer a barrier between me and the world. It was a bridge that connected me to a global community of speakers and thinkers. As I reflect on this journey now, 3 years after that rainy Tuesday evening when I met Robert in the coffee shop, I'm amazed at how profoundly one simple decision changed my life. Reading in English every day didn't just improve my language skills. It transformed who I was as a person. I became more patient with myself and my learning process. I learned to trust that consistent, gentle effort over time could produce extraordinary results. I discovered that learning could be joyful instead of stressful, that growth could happen through pleasure instead of pain. The confidence I gained from mastering English reading spilled over into every area of my life. If I could transform my relationship with an entire language through daily reading, what else could I accomplish through consistent, patient practice? This question became a driving force for personal growth that extended far beyond language learning. I started reading in other subjects that interested me: psychology, philosophy, science, art history. Each book opened new intellectual doors and gave me new ways to understand myself and the world around me. Reading became not just a language learning tool, but a tool for lifelong learning and personal development. The emotional intelligence I developed through reading stories helped me understand people better. Through countless characters and their experiences, I had lived through situations I had never physically encountered. I had felt emotions from perspectives different from my own. This made me more empathetic, more understanding, and better at navigating relationships in real life. My worldview expanded in ways I couldn't have imagined. Reading authors from different cultures, backgrounds, and time periods exposed me to ideas and perspectives that challenged my assumptions and broadened my understanding of human experience. English reading became a window into the full diversity of human thought and feeling. I also discovered something wonderful about the English-speaking community. It's incredibly welcoming to people who make the effort to truly engage with the language. When native speakers realized that I could participate fully in sophisticated conversations, when they saw that I appreciated the nuances and beauty of their language, they embraced me as a fellow member of the English-speaking world. This sense of belonging was something I had never expected to find. I had thought that as a non-native speaker, I would always be an outsider looking in. But reading had given me such a deep understanding of how English worked, not just grammatically, but culturally and emotionally, that I could participate as an insider. The professional opportunities that opened up were incredible. My improved English skills qualified me for international projects, global teams, and leadership roles that required sophisticated communication skills. But more than that, my ability to read and understand complex English texts gave me access to the latest research and thinking in my field, keeping me at the cutting edge of developments in my industry. I started writing articles and blog posts in English, sharing my expertise with a global audience. The writing skills I had developed through reading enabled me to communicate complex ideas clearly and persuasively. I even began speaking at international conferences, something that would have been unthinkable 3 years earlier. One of the most rewarding aspects of this journey has been sharing it with others. I started mentoring other English learners, sharing the reading approach that had transformed my own language skills. Watching them experience their own breakthroughs and transformations has been incredibly fulfilling. I learned that my experience wasn't unique. Many successful English learners had discovered the power of reading, often by accident or through the advice of wise mentors like Robert. But I also learned that many people were still struggling with traditional approaches that weren't serving them well. This led me to become an advocate for reading-based language learning. I started a blog where I shared book recommendations for English learners, tips for building a sustainable reading habit, and stories of transformation from people who had used reading to improve their English. The response was overwhelming. I heard from learners all over the world who were experiencing their own versions of the 10 changes I had discovered. Some found that reading helped them overcome specific challenges like understanding idioms or improving their writing. Others discovered that it gave them confidence to pursue opportunities they had never thought possible. What struck me most was how universal the experience seemed to be, regardless of their native language, cultural background, or previous English learning experience. People who committed to daily reading in English experienced similar transformations. There was something fundamental about how reading worked with the brain's natural language learning mechanisms. I began to understand that reading was so effective because it mimicked how we learned our first language. Babies and children don't learn language through grammar lessons and vocabulary drills. They learn through immersion in meaningful, emotionally engaging language experiences. Reading provided that same kind of rich, meaningful exposure to English. The books I chose during my journey became like old friends. I could remember not just the stories, but how I felt when reading them, what my English level was like at the time, what new discoveries I made through each one. The outsiders would always remind me of the excitement of taking my first steps. Wonder would always be connected to the breakthrough of thinking directly in English. I developed preferences for certain authors whose writing styles particularly resonated with me. I discovered that I loved the way John Green captured teenage emotions, how Harper Lee painted pictures with words, how Malcolm Gladwell explained complex ideas with clarity and engaging examples. These preferences helped me understand something important about language learning. It's not just about acquiring skills, it's about developing taste, style, and personal connection with the language. English wasn't just becoming functional for me, it was becoming an aesthetic experience, a source of beauty and pleasure. I also learned to appreciate the different varieties of English. Reading authors from the UK, Australia, Canada, and different regions of the United States exposed me to the wonderful diversity within the English language. I could recognize and understand different dialects, slang, and cultural references, making me a more sophisticated and versatile English user. The reading habit itself evolved over time. What started as a disciplined commitment to read for 30 minutes every day gradually became something I looked forward to, then something I couldn't imagine living without. Reading in English became as natural and necessary as eating or sleeping. I developed strategies for maintaining the habit even during busy or challenging periods. I learned to carry books with me everywhere, to use audiobooks during commutes, to read on my phone during short breaks. The key was flexibility, finding ways to maintain the daily connection with English reading regardless of circumstances. I also learned to balance different types of reading. Fiction provided emotional engagement and cultural understanding. Nonfiction gave me access to new ideas and information. Poetry taught me about the musical qualities of English. News articles kept me connected to current events and contemporary language use. Each type of reading contributed something different to my English development. Fiction improved my understanding of dialogue and narrative flow. Technical writing taught me precision and clarity. Humorous writing helped me understand wit and wordplay. Academic writing introduced me to formal register and complex argumentation. I discovered the importance of reading both above and below my comfort level. Easier books allowed me to build fluency and confidence, while more challenging texts pushed me to grow and learn new things. The combination kept me motivated and constantly progressing. The digital age provided incredible resources for English readers. E-books allowed me to look up unfamiliar words instantly without breaking the flow of reading. Audiobooks let me hear proper pronunciation while following along with text. Online book communities connected me with other readers who shared my interests. I learned to use these tools strategically for new or difficult books. I might use the dictionary function frequently at first, then gradually wean myself off it as I became more comfortable with the author's style. For familiar authors or genres, I would challenge myself to read without any assistance, building my ability to understand from context. The social aspect of reading became increasingly important. I joined book clubs, participated in online discussions, and started conversations with other readers about books we had both enjoyed. These interactions deepened my understanding of the books and gave me practice expressing complex ideas and opinions in English. Discussing books in English was particularly valuable because it required me to analyze, evaluate, and articulate my thoughts about sophisticated topics. It wasn't enough to understand the story. I had to be able to explain why I liked or disliked certain aspects, how the book related to other works I had read, and what themes or messages I found meaningful. Looking back on this 3-year journey, I can see that the transformation happened in phases. The first few months were about building the habit and seeing the initial changes, the natural expressions, the reduced translation, the emotional connection. This phase was exciting because the progress was so noticeable and rapid. The second phase, roughly months 4 through 12, was about deepening and expanding. My vocabulary grew exponentially, my writing improved dramatically, and my confidence soared. This was when I really began to feel like English belonged to me, when I started taking on new challenges and opportunities. The third phase, from year 1 to year 3, has been about mastery and sophistication. I can now engage with the most complex English texts, participate in high-level professional and academic discussions, and express myself with nuance and precision. English has become not just functional for me, but artistic and personal. But perhaps most importantly, I learned that this journey never really ends. Even now, after 3 years of daily reading, I continue to discover new aspects of the language, new authors who expand my understanding, new ways that English can be used to express human experience. This ongoing discovery keeps the learning fresh and exciting. I'm no longer learning English, I'm living in English, growing in English, creating in English. The language has become a medium for my thoughts, dreams, and aspirations, not just a tool for communication. The ripple effects of this transformation continue to surprise me. My success with English reading gave me the confidence to tackle other challenging learning projects. I've since learned to play piano, started painting, and begun studying Italian using similar reading-based approaches. More importantly, I've developed a deep faith in the power of consistent, patient practice. I now know viscerally that small daily actions, sustained over time, can produce extraordinary transformations. This knowledge has become a cornerstone of how I approach personal growth and goal achievement. The relationship I developed with Robert, the elderly gentleman who first suggested daily reading, became one of the most meaningful connections of my life. We met monthly for coffee to discuss books we were reading, and he became both a mentor and a dear friend. His wisdom extended far beyond language learning to life philosophy and personal development. Through Robert, I learned that language learning is ultimately about human connection. English wasn't just a skill to acquire, it was a bridge to relationships, ideas, and experiences that would enrich my entire life. The goal wasn't just to speak English well, but to become a more complete, connected, and capable human being. When Robert passed away last year, I felt the loss deeply, but I also felt profound gratitude for the gift he had given me. His simple advice to read every day had transformed my life in ways neither of us could have imagined when we first met in that coffee shop. Today, I want to share this story with anyone who feels stuck in their English learning journey, anyone who has tried multiple approaches without finding the breakthrough they're looking for. I want them to know that the solution might be simpler than they think, but also more powerful than they can imagine. Reading in English every day won't just improve your language skills. It will transform your relationship with learning, with yourself, and with the possibilities available to you in life. It will open doors you didn't even know existed and give you tools you didn't know you needed. The 10 changes I experienced: absorbing natural expressions, thinking directly in English, developing emotional connection, expanding vocabulary contextually, improving writing naturally, enhancing pronunciation, understanding nuance, building confidence, accessing new ideas, and learning how to learn joyfully. These were just the beginning. The real transformation was deeper and more holistic. Reading taught me patience with myself, respect for the learning process, and faith in the power of consistent effort. It showed me that sustainable change happens gradually, organically, and enjoyably when we align our learning with our natural curiosity and interests. If you're ready to begin this journey, start small and be patient with yourself. Choose books that interest you and are slightly below your current comfort level. Read for just 15 or 20 minutes at first, then gradually increase as the habit becomes established. Focus on enjoyment and understanding rather than perfection. Trust the process, even when progress seems slow. Remember that the most profound changes happen quietly, beneath the surface, like roots growing deep before the tree shoots toward the sky. Your brain is doing incredible work even when you're not consciously aware of it. Find your own Robert, a mentor, teacher, or friend who believes in your potential and can offer guidance along the way. Join communities of other learners who share your goals and can provide support during challenging times. Most importantly, remember that this journey is about so much more than language learning. It's about discovering what you're capable of when you commit to something fully, when you approach learning with joy instead of stress, when you trust in your own potential for growth and transformation. The person you become through this process will be more confident, more capable, and more connected to the world around you. The English skills are just the vehicle. The real destination is a more empowered, expanded version of yourself. 3 years ago, I was frustrated, stuck, and doubting my ability to ever truly master English. Today, I'm writing this story to inspire others, living and working in English with complete confidence, and continuously growing through the books I read and the connections I make. This transformation is available to anyone willing to make the commitment. The only requirements are consistency, patience, and the courage to believe that small daily actions can create extraordinary results. Your journey awaits. The only question is, when will you begin?